I think we've come to the conclusion that like Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, LSU, and Ohio State are the schools that are recruiting at a level that's just sort of they have national title rosters. I'm just looking at this, and you could throw Oklahoma in their mix because they're in the playoffs regularly. They always have a good quarterback play. I'm not going to include them in this discussion, but I'm just curious, spitballing here. I'm looking at the 2020 team rankings after that top five, and I'm gonna exclude Oklahoma because, like I said, they're already basically there. But like A&M, Auburn, Texas, Florida, Tennessee. That's through the top 10. I'll go through like the 15 here, or I'll go through like 16 because. Well, let me say this: like Oregon, Miami, Michigan, Penn State, Washington, Notre Dame. Let's just say as schools that have over the last few years typically been in that kind of contending for top tier class range. Do any of those jump out as classes that if they landed a tier up quarterback, not even like a transcendent Trevor Lawrence, but just a quarterback better than what they've had that can make them a better team that they can then build on to springboard into like a Clemson type of advancements? Do any of those just like jump out to you?
This is a topic that I've been really interested on, and just like, are we seeing a new class of super team, right? And my initial answer is always yes, but I think if you argued it in the moment, in prior decades, you could have said the exact same thing, right? Like, is Nebraska and Miami a new class of super team? When they were winning 5 out of 10 titles in a decade. So you mentioned those 5, right? Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU. I think Texas absolutely could. Like they recruit at a close enough level. Florida could, Michigan could, Auburn could, Penn State could. We have a Notre Dame question, so I'm going to push it off, but I think they're in the conversation. And I think that's the way they have to do it, by the way, if you're Notre Dame. USC, clearly, Texas A&M, Florida State. The 2 here I think I want to include, and then there's kind of a drop, right, for me, are Miami and Washington. Like, if you want to include some West Coast powers. The next one's obviously, like, I think if you're going to put Washington, you have to put Oregon in there. And then do you put Tennessee in there based on what they're doing right now? Like, they haven't been able to sustain this at all, and like, if they don't have a good year on the field, there's a pretty good chance their class somewhat falls apart. But I think you put them in. And then after that, man, there is a huge drop-off. Like, after those teams I just listed, and the drop-off is like Stanford, South Carolina, Maryland, Nebraska, UCLA, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Kentucky, North Carolina, Ole Miss, Virginia Tech, Arizona State, Pitt, TCU. Like, to me, that's where the huge drop-off is. Everybody else that we listed kind of gets athletes, and if you get a super QB, I could see them making a run. Not a Bama 5-year type run.
So, and to narrow down the exercise even more, I guess I think of it as like who has the Clemson recipe in that all they're missing is that quarterback, and they have maybe a really strong foundation in terms of their like. My worry with Texas is like there's been like I don't have confidence in the rest of their program yet. I don't have confidence in the stability in the coaching staff, the coordinators. Like, they still have a lot to prove there.
Okay. So I was answering it more from the perspective of
right.
Like,
and
can they get the talent and then level up just with the quarterback?
Right. I'm trying to think of it more in the term. I didn't clarify that, but I'm trying to think of it more in the terms of like from who can do sort of what Clemson has done. I think Penn State is definitely. I'm looking at Auburn, and I'm wondering about Auburn because I just wonder how much I ding Auburn for being turned off by Gus Malzahn's offense. But yes, like they have the coordinator, they have a head coach, and hey, maybe they're about to have the former Clemson OC and Chad Morris. Like, it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, maybe Auburn is the one. I think Auburn makes sense. I think
Penn State, like you said, yeah.
Penn State definitely makes sense. We'll talk Notre Dame; they make sense, but we'll dig in more on them in a question later. I think Florida makes some sense in the sense of what could Dan Mullen do with the quarterback, because then it's about we've already seen what Dan Mullen could do with Dak Prescott. So what happens when Dan Mullen gets that kind of a talent at Florida? Maybe he has him with Kyle Trask. We'll see. But what's the follow up act at Florida with that. And I think Tennessee is a fair one to sort of put in the mix there as far as like they could get their Taj Boyd. Like they need their Taj Boyd. They don't need their Deshaun Watson. Like they could just start taking the steps towards the Clemson track if they just get their Taj Boyd. That's the first step. Maybe that's Harrison Bailey. We'll see. And then, I think Michigan is like they haven't had a Taj Boyd in a while either, really. I mean, give them a 6-round quarterback and let's see what Michigan can do. That would be fair. I mean, but point being, like it's an interesting exercise to think about. Like when you think about Clemson as more of a product of, there's a lot that's gone into it, but a product of quarterbacking and a product of Dabo Swinney's leadership and making good hires. It frames it as a little bit more of an attainable route. As hard as that is, you're still a couple hires and a couple a couple players away from sort of accelerating in a really dramatic way.